Porter Cottrell was a name that left a real mark on professional bodybuilding during an incredibly competitive era, especially from the late 1980s through the entire 1990s. While many athletes were going all in on extreme mass, Porter stood out for a completely different reason: aesthetics, balance, and clean lines that echoed the sport's classic era. Born on August 30th, 1962, in Louisville, Kentucky, Porter didn't come from one of the world's major bodybuilding hubs. Even so, he managed to reach the very top of the IFBB, competing side by side with some of the greatest names in the sport's history. Among fans and experts, he became known by nicknames that said a lot about who he was: the Southern Gentleman, and also the Gentleman King of bodybuilding. Those titles weren't just about his physique, but about how he carried himself on and off the stage. Porter was never associated with scandals or controversy. His image was always tied to elegance, respect, and professionalism. It all started long before Porter Cottrell even knew what bodybuilding was. As a kid, he went to the movies with his father and watched Hercules, starring Steve Reeves. That image stuck with him. It wasn't just about strength or muscle. It was the look, the presence, the idea of a body that seemed sculpted. Without realizing it, that moment planted a life goal in his mind. Porter later said that at the time, he didn't understand anything about training, dieting, or competing. But he knew one thing for sure: he wanted to look like that. From then on, he watched every Steve Reeves movie he could find and soon started devouring bodybuilding magazines borrowed from friends. Curiosity turned into obsession, and obsession turned into discipline. As a teenager, though, reality looked very different from the dream. Porter was extremely skinny, weighing around 55 kilograms, roughly 121 pounds. Visually, he didn't look like someone destined for a bodybuilding stage. Even so, he started training at a very young age, somewhere between 12 and 16 years old. There were no modern gyms or fancy machines. Workouts happened in the backyard, in garages, or small sheds, using concrete weights and improvised barbells. His diet was just as improvised, and by today's standards, pretty extreme. Porter would eat massive amounts of peanut butter sandwiches every single day, simply trying to put on weight. And the results came fast. Within just a few months, his body responded in an impressive way. Before becoming known on the competitive stage, Porter had to deal with real life outside of bodybuilding. In his early adult years, he worked as a welder and machine operator, tough, repetitive, physically demanding jobs. They paid the bills, but they didn't feed the dream he had carried since childhood. Over time, Porter realized he needed something more stable and more meaningful. That's when the opportunity to join the fire department came along. For him, it wasn't just a job. It was a way to help people, find purpose, and build a solid career, which was crucial for someone who understood that bodybuilding alone didn't guarantee financial security. Life as a firefighter was intense. 24-hour shifts followed by 48 hours off. And interestingly, that exact schedule became an unexpected advantage for his bodybuilding career. While many athletes struggled to fit training into their daily routines, Porter had full blocks of free time to focus on his physique. Those days off were taken seriously: training, resting, eating, and traveling to compete when needed. Porter liked to joke, but he meant it completely. That bodybuilding was his second job. There was no improvising and no excuses. Absolute discipline, both at the firehouse and in the gym. Porter's entry into competitive bodybuilding came during the 1980s, starting with local and regional shows. That's where many talents emerged, and Porter quickly began to stand out. Even without being the biggest guy on stage, his balanced, well-built physique separated him from the rest, making it clear there was something special about this competitor. Shows like Mr. Louisville and Mr. Kentucky were crucial early steps. In these contests, Porter gained confidence, stage experience, and, most importantly, visibility. The big breakthrough came in 1988 when Porter won the NPC Junior Nationals, taking both his weight class and the overall title. That moment officially put him on the national bodybuilding map. Even with that success, Porter stayed fully locked in on the amateur circuit. In 1991, he earned the biggest win of his amateur career, the NPC Nationals title in the light heavyweight class. That victory finally brought him the long-awaited IFBB Pro card, his official passport to compete against the best bodybuilders in the world. Interestingly, in the overall comparison at that same event, Porter ended up losing to Kevin Levrone. The year 1992 marked a turning point in Porter Cottrell's life. In his very first appearance as an IFBB professional, he stepped on stage at the Chicago Pro Invitational and shocked everyone by taking first place. For a rookie to win his pro debut was extremely rare, and it made it clear that Porter wasn't there just to gain experience. Not long after, he repeated the feat at the Niagara Falls Pro Invitational, securing his second professional win almost back-to-back. In a matter of weeks, Porter already had 2 major pro titles on his resume. The message was loud and clear that compact, aesthetic, perfectly proportioned physique worked at the pro level too. In the early 1990s, a specific rivalry began to catch the attention of hardcore bodybuilding fans: Porter Cottrell versus Kevin Levrone. It wasn't just a battle for podium spots, it was a true clash of styles. On one side, an aesthetic, compact, classic physique. On the other, an athlete who symbolized the rapid rise of extreme mass in the modern era. Kevin Levrone was quickly seen as the Goliath of that generation. Massive size, incredible muscle density, and a physique that seemed to grow every single season. He represented exactly where bodybuilding was heading at the time: more weight, more visual impact, and a presence that intimidated anyone standing next to him on stage. Porter, meanwhile, played the opposite role in that story. He was the David, smaller in size, but armed with eye-catching symmetry. Wide shoulders, a tight waist, clean lines, and an overall harmony that made his physique look complete from every angle. It wasn't about who was bigger, it was about who was better built. Comparisons between the two became constant. Classic aesthetics versus extreme mass. Proportion versus brute muscle. And what made it even more interesting was that, in several cases, Porter didn't just compete, he won. One of the most talked about moments of that era was their direct showdown. In Chicago, Porter came out on top and beat Levrone on stage. Just 1 week later, in New York, the roles were reversed and Levrone took the win. That back and forth helped build a powerful narrative around both men and instantly placed Porter at the center of the global bodybuilding spotlight. That exchange of victories cemented Porter as one of the best rookies of the 1990s. He wasn't just showing up, he was fighting for titles against athletes who would soon become legends of the sport. And all of this while still being considered small by the standards of the time. Even weighing between 200 and 210 pounds, roughly 91 to 95 kilograms, Porter proved that size wasn't everything. From 1992 to 1994, Porter Cottrell experienced what can honestly be called his golden years in professional bodybuilding. In that short window, he went from a promising newcomer to one of the most respected and well-rounded competitors in the IFBB. In 1992, beyond his early wins as a rookie, he confirmed his consistency by taking second place at the Night of Champions, one of the toughest shows of the era. That same year, he made his Mr. Olympia debut in Helsinki, finishing in 8th place. The absolute peak came in 1993. That was the year Porter won every single competition he entered. The highlight was the Night of Champions, where he topped an incredibly stacked lineup and defeated none other than Andreas Munzer. That win carried serious weight, because Munzer was widely seen as one of the most extreme and visually shocking physiques of that time. In 1994, Porter proved that his success wasn't a one-off. He stepped onto the Arnold Classic stage and earned an impressive 3rd place, going up against athletes who were bigger and heavier. At the Mr. Olympia, he came in even sharper and finished 5th, his best placement ever at the most prestigious bodybuilding competition in the world. Physically, Porter always stood out for going against the trend that started to dominate bodybuilding in the 1990s. His height is usually listed between 1.67 and 1.73 meters, roughly 5 feet 6 inches to 5 feet 8 inches, depending on the source, which put him below many of his direct rivals. Still, once he was on stage, that difference almost disappeared thanks to how well his body was built. What really defined Porter was a compact, dense physique where nothing looked out of place. Every muscle group flowed naturally into the next, creating a very clean and easy-to-read look. His wide, round shoulders were without question his biggest trademark. They created an incredibly strong V-taper, even without extreme mass. That alone made his upper body look bigger than it actually was, and pushed his classic aesthetics even further. Another major strength was his full, proportional chest, which blended perfectly with his shoulders and arms. Nothing looked artificially blown up. Everything gave off a sense of balance and muscular maturity. Porter's training philosophy was just as solid as the physique he built over the years. Unlike many athletes who followed complicated split routines, he always preferred something simple and effective. 2 days of training followed by 1 day of rest. This approach respected recovery and fit perfectly into his demanding schedule as a firefighter. A large portion of his training was based on full-body workouts, something that's being talked about again today, but that Porter was already using decades ago. The idea was to stimulate the entire body, keep training frequency high, and make sure no muscle group ever fell behind. Another key point was his lack of rigid routines. Porter didn't walk into the gym with a workout written down on paper. He assessed how his body felt that day and chose exercises on the spot. That freedom came from a clear belief: the body adapts quickly, and repeating the same stimuli over and over is a guaranteed path to stagnation. When you look closer at Porter's training, it becomes obvious that nothing was random. One of the pillars of his approach was frequent use of dumbbells, especially for shoulder training. To Porter, dumbbells allowed a greater range of motion, better mind-muscle connection, and much more control over execution, all essential for someone chasing aesthetics, not just heavy weights. He also favored moderate to high reps. Instead of focusing only on lifting the heaviest weight possible, Porter aimed to really feel the muscle working through longer sets. This helped refine his shape, improve muscle density, and reduce injury risk, crucial for someone training hard year after year. The lateral delts received special attention. Porter understood they were the key to creating the illusion of upper body width. Well-developed side delts made the waist look even smaller and delivered that classic V-taper that set him apart on stage. Interestingly, Porter avoided heavy squats for many years, not because he lacked strength, but because of strategy. He believed squats could overdevelop the hips and glutes, potentially hurting the aesthetic flow of his physique. Instead, he relied on other leg movements, maintaining leg development while preserving a tight waistline. Another smart detail was his exercise order. Porter often trained shoulders right after chest, taking advantage of pre-fatigued front delts. This allowed him to train shoulders more efficiently, using less weight and more control. His diet also followed a different path than most people imagine when they think of professional bodybuilding. Porter relied almost entirely on whole foods, avoiding heavy dependence on shakes and supplements whenever possible. His nutritional strategy revolved around high protein intake, moderate carbohydrates, and, especially early in his career, very low fat. At the time, it was widely believed that cutting fat as much as possible was the fastest way to get lean. Porter followed that mindset for years, particularly during contest prep. In his more extreme phases, he even adopted an almost ketogenic-style approach during contest prep, cutting carbohydrates down to extremely low levels. The visual results showed up, but the cost was high. Porter later said he felt miserable, drained, low on energy, with declining performance and struggles that went far beyond normal prep fatigue. Over time, a tougher and more honest realization set in. Porter acknowledged that much of what he went through was due to a lack of essential fats in his diet. He openly admitted that, back then, he didn't fully understand how crucial those fats were for hormones, recovery, and overall well-being. It was a lesson learned the hard way, through real mistakes and real consequences. Like almost every top-level athlete of the 1990s, Porter Cottrell was also surrounded by rumors and speculation, especially when it came to steroid use. It was an era when bodybuilding lived under constant suspicion, and any above-average physique automatically raised questions. Porter was never immune to that scrutiny. His response, however, was always direct and consistent. Porter denied using drugs and credited his results to 3 very clear pillars: favorable genetics, extreme discipline, and long-term consistency over many years. He never got into heated arguments or tried to aggressively convince critics. He preferred to let his journey speak for itself. What truly set Porter apart in that environment was his personal character. He was widely known as a humble, polite, and approachable athlete, not just with fans, but also with fellow competitors. After his peak years, Porter continued competing consistently through the late 1990s. Even as bodybuilding became increasingly dominated by ultramassive physiques, he stayed true to his aesthetic identity and kept appearing on major stages, always earning respect and holding his own in comparisons. As the years went by, results naturally became more inconsistent, something inevitable in a sport that's both brutally demanding and constantly evolving. Still, Porter continued to show that he could compete at a high level. He was no longer the surprise factor, but a seasoned veteran, well known and respected by judges, athletes, and fans alike. In 1999, his final major competitive highlight came with a third-place finish at the Toronto Pro Invitational. That result perfectly symbolized the closing of his professional bodybuilding chapter. Still competitive, still relevant, but fully aware that the time had come to step away. That same year, Porter officially announced his retirement from professional bodybuilding. There were no controversies or public frustrations attached to the decision. On the contrary, it was a mature exit from someone who understood he had fulfilled his role in the sport and built a solid legacy. Even after leaving the stage, Porter continued for several more years in his other calling. He remained with the fire department until 2009, when he also retired from that profession. With that, he closed two intense chapters of his life, both defined by discipline, service, and total commitment. After stepping away from competition, Porter Cottrell didn't leave bodybuilding behind. He simply changed roles. All the experience he had built over decades of training, competing, and physically demanding work was redirected into a new mission, becoming a full-time personal trainer. Now, instead of chasing titles, he focused on helping others transform their own bodies. The focus of this new phase was never extreme aesthetics or the stage. Porter became an advocate for health, longevity, and quality of life, something that made even more sense after pushing his own body to the limit for so many years. He understood better than anyone the long-term physical price that poor choices can carry. One group, in particular, became a priority: men over 40. Porter realized that many people in that age range still wanted strength, muscle, and a solid physique, but without wrecking their joints, hormones, or overall well-being. His mission became showing that progress is absolutely possible when training is done intelligently and with respect for the body. Unlike much of the fitness industry, Porter has always made a point of rejecting miracle methods, extreme diets, and quick-fix promises. For him, nothing replaces consistency, balanced nutrition, and well-executed training. When we look back at the history of bodybuilding, Porter holds a very specific and highly respected place. Right in the middle of the mass era, when the sport was moving harder and harder toward gigantic physiques, he became an icon of classic aesthetics. His body was a reminder that bodybuilding is also about art, symmetry, and proportion, not just raw size. Porter proved in real life that symmetry can compete with extreme mass. And more than that, it can win. On several stages, he defeated bigger athletes precisely because his physique was more harmonious, better shaped, and simply more pleasing to the eye. That sent a clear message to both fans and judges. There's more than one path to excellence in this sport. Porter Cottrell's story shows that bodybuilding goes far beyond trophies and scorecards. It's about choices, discipline, identity, and, above all, staying true to your path, even when it goes against the trend of the moment. Porter proved that you can compete at the highest level without giving up principles, balance, and respect for your own body. If this journey made you think about aesthetics, longevity, and what real progress in bodybuilding actually means, hit the like button right now. It helps the channel a lot to keep bringing deep, well-told stories like this one. And if you're not subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss upcoming videos about legends, rivalries, and the most fascinating behind-the-scenes moments in bodybuilding. Here on the channel, anyone who wants to support the work even more can become a member, directly helping us produce even more complete and exclusive content. And now I want to hear from you. Would Porter Cottrell win more titles if he competed today? Does classic aesthetics still have a place in modern bodybuilding? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't leave just yet. On the end screen, there's another video that connects directly with this story, an analysis that will perfectly complement everything you just watched. Click there, keep watching with us, and I'll see you in the next video.